Liberal Viewer present.
So I was watching President Bush's press conference last week, and one part really worried me, that Bush doesn't know the difference between tactics and strategy, or at least who's in charge of each. I actually took a history seminar in college on the topic of strategy, and I was able to dig up one of my old textbooks. Now, this book details various levels of military decision-making, from the tactics used by individuals in small units to the strategy employed across an entire operation or theater. There's even a level of grand strategy, which combines military, economic, and political planning to reach long-term national goals. So, see if Bush uses these terms correctly in this exchange he had with ABC's Martha Raddatz.
Mr. President, I'd like to go back to Iraq. You have continually cited the elections, the new government, is progress in Iraq, and yet the violence has gotten worse in certain areas. You have to go to Baghdad again. Is it not time for a new strategy? And if not, why not?
You know, Martha, you've covered the Pentagon. You know that the Pentagon is constantly adjusting tactics because they have the flexibility from the White House to do so.
I'm talking about strategy.
No, the strategy is to help the Iraqi people achieve their objectives and their dreams, which is a democratic society. That's the strategy. The tactics. Now, either you say, yes, it's important and we stay there and get it done, or we leave. We're not leaving so long as I'm the president. That would be a huge mistake. It would send an unbelievably, terrible signal to reformers across the region. It would say we've abandoned our desire to change the conditions that create terror. It would give the terrorists a safe haven from which to launch attacks. It would embolden Iran. It would embolden extremists. No, we're not leaving. The strategic objective is to help this government succeed. That's the strategic. And not only to help the government, the reformers in Iraq succeed, but to help the reformers across the region succeed, to fight off the elements of extremism. The tactics are which change. Now, if you say, are you going to change your strategic objective, it means you're leaving before the mission is complete. And we're not going to leave before the mission is complete. I agree with General Abizade. We leave before the mission is done, the terrorists will follow us here. And so we have changed tactics. Our commanders have got the flexibility necessary to change tactics on the ground, starting with Plan Baghdad. And that's when we moved troops from Mosul into Baghdad and replaced them with a Stryker brigade. So in that, we increased troops during this time of instability. Suzanne.
So that's not really the question. The strategy is...
Sound like the question to me.
You keep saying that you don't want to leave, but is your strategy to win working? Even if you don't want to leave. You've gone into Baghdad before. These things have happened before.
If I didn't think it would work, I would change our commanders would recommend changing the strategy.
Did you see that last part? Bush actually said that if he didn't think his strategy was working, his commanders would recommend changing the strategy. Not only is that statement one of those nonsensical Bushisms, but he makes it sound like the military commanders are responsible for assessing if his plan is working. On that point, compare this analysis from a man with actual combat experience.
I know that military commanders on the ground need more troops, whether they're asking for them or not. But see, this is kind of a false argument. It's not up to the commanders on the ground. It's up to the leaders who assess the entire battlefield situation to decide whether they need. I've known very few, General McCaffrey's going to follow, I've known very few commanders in the field who say I need help. So it's up to the assessment made at the Pentagon level, and from the beginning we didn't have enough in the initial invasion. I think it's got to do with the decisions that are made in the Pentagon, and I think that that's the sum total of it, and the advice that the President gets from the people that are on his team, and I don't think it's good advice.
McCain goes on to make clear he thinks Bush has been listening to bad advice from Rumsfeld and the Pentagon. But even more ominous was this grand strategy analysis from another military man later in the program.
One of the other problems that I think the administration is trying to face up to finally, certainly in National Security Council, is we drained $55 billion out of the U.S. Air Force and the Navy, and we're putting that money into ammunition, medical care for wounded soldiers. We're literally giving up our modernization program for the forces that need to be there in 10, 20 years to deter the People's Republic of China. We don't need the F-22 to confront the Iraqi insurgents. We need that high-tech capability to make sure we maintain stability in the coming years. So the danger is we end up 36 months from now with our military fundamentally broken, and that's what I'm concerned about.
So, does spending the next 3 years breaking our military in Iraq so we're unable to defend ourselves in the future really make Bush strong on defense? And does Bush know he's the one who's in charge of strategy?
YouTube, you decide.